Well, good morning, everyone. Here we are for another episode of the Four Amigos now. We got four of us. And today we're going to be talking about an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. Ron's going to be leading us in a discussion of in this article, Californians came in last in terms of personal income increase over the past couple of years. So Ron, help us understand a little bit and give us some insight as to what you've
Sure,
seen.
be happy to. I'm going to just I'm going to kind of paraphrase this article. Well, actually, I won't paraphrase it. I'll give it to you exactly, but I'm not going to read the entire thing, so it won't be that boring. The Bureau of Economic Analysis (BEA) late last week published its 2022 report on state personal income growth for that year. It deserves more media attention than it's been getting, which the Wall Street Journal says is none. So none of us know anything about this, which I thought it might make it interesting because it has a lot to do with small businesses in California. Lockdown states would have been expected to record a stronger rebound last year compared to 2021, when many of their restrictions were still in effect. But that's not what happened. Net earnings last year grew most in Idaho, 12.5%, Texas, 11.5%, Nevada, 10.8%, Florida, 10.7%, and it goes on. By contrast, earnings growth in nearly all lockdown states fell below the national average of 8%. California ranked dead last at 5%, while Maryland was 5.5, Massachusetts 6.2, Hawaii 6.2, and New York 6.7. And of course, all of those, which are democratically run states, significantly trailed the national average. One reason is because of population migration. During the pandemic, fewer workers equals fewer earnings. States with the greatest earnings in 2022 also had a large population inflows, and of course, a lot of them from California. And they also represent high tax states. Governor Gavin Newsom can't blame layoffs in the tech industry. Earnings in information fell by 3.5% in California last year, but climbed 6.2% nationwide. So California and Maryland were the only two states in which information earnings declined. And so those are the basic facts. And while we're hearing all of this other political stuff going on, nobody has really mentioned it. I listen to business-oriented stations all the time. Never heard a thing about this. So it's definitely something that we just haven't heard. But I think maybe more important than the fact that we haven't heard it, that's another whole dynamic, is really what in the heck is going on, where California, which has been the golden state, is obviously extremely tarnished. When we add to that the highest level of poverty in the United States as a percentage of the total, beating out about 3 years ago, beating out Mississippi for the most poor people in the nation. This may be part of the reason why. And of course, I don't have to tell you, but for our audience, California housing prices are still, even though there's been a little bit of a decline, they're still extraordinarily high based on the rest of the nation. Combine those two things together, lower earnings and higher rents, California is in a state of serious hurt. Comments from the peanut gallery.
Point of clarity before Ed, obviously we'll dig in a little deeper here, but a point of clarity, I think the reference was to net personal income, correct? And so I'd be interested to see, and that may be where the devil's in the details, but I have a suspicion that if we looked at gross personal income, we'd actually be sitting perhaps and we don't know, at a more favorable position because of the taxation issue. And that's covering up. It's covered up when we talk about net. We don't really
Well,
know.
in a sense, it covers, it may cover up the amount of taxes that we actually pay. But in a sense, the question here and the issue to people is how much money is left in their pockets to pay their rent. So net income is really the number we're looking at. I don't think there's any question about salaries being higher in California. I mean, they're much higher than many other states in the Midwest. But as Ray just has stated off the air, you know, his nephew bought a nice brick home with a full basement in the Midwest for $90,000, and you know, it's like, okay, there's a big difference here because the average around here is more like 400,000, and you may be living in a pretty lousy neighborhood at
I was going to
400,000.
say, well, that'd buy a nice garage.
Yeah. So you know, it's net gain, I think, that is the issue here is that are our days over? And especially this group speaking about small businesses. What does that mean for small businesses? What does it mean for startups? We know that a lot of small business people have left the state along with a lot of wealthy people.
I would have to say, you know, based on what we've seen in the past, Ron, you know, is that, you know, these things do happen, but California, for whatever reason, tends to be either independent of a lot of that or manages to work through it because people come here for the climate. It was interesting, John, you were talking about Auckland, which is behind you. And, you know, people stay in a community because of the weather and the temperature and the climate as much as anything. And, you know, that's not changing. You know, you can't take California and move it to Seattle or whatever. So I think, you know, one of the things that's always going to keep people here in spite of the costs is they like it. You know, where else can you go where I can go for an hour into the mountains and ski and an hour later I can be surfing? There are very few places in the world where you can do that.
Oh, that's definitely true. And if you have a little company and you pay your people well enough to be able to afford the $70, $80, $90, $100 a day ski lift ticket prices and much more up in Mammoth, then it's a great place to live. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But the question is, are there going to be enough people to keep the economy running? You know, and ultimately, will that bog us down?
Well, you know, that's an interesting question. I don't know, Ed, have you been tracking at all, you know, the number of people looking for jobs?
Well, I think the key question here is why the net income hasn't grown as much as other parts of the country. Isn't that the real question of the article?
Yeah, I think it's just.
I think we got to keep focused on that if that's what the article stated. And I really don't know why it would be going down, why it wouldn't be going up more than the other states. It doesn't make any sense to me at all because of the vibrancy of this economy. This economy in California is very big. It's either the top 5 or top 7 in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I really find it hard to believe. I think the .com companies did have significant reductions last year, and probably the people getting a lot of money off these stock options really impacted the average for the whole state. But I also, by the same token, we have a lot of people that are living paycheck to paycheck in this state, and that's what you said, Ron, is starting off the article. A lot of people, we have either really poor people or really rich people. And it seems like the politics are based upon the really rich people, and the poorer people have to make a living just getting by, and they have to rely upon government assistance and things of that nature. So, you know, I'm kind of baffled why California hasn't rebounded. You know, I don't understand. And real estate is a big factor, and real estate has gone up. And I don't know I think what John said makes some sense too, because I think you got to identify what's in the detail, because if it's gross wages, that's one thing. If it's disposable income, that's another thing. So I'm confused. Sorry.
Well, it is confusing, and California is baffling. No question about it. And as Ray said, there's some wonderful things about California that have made it the Golden State from the 1860s and 1850s, actually. And in the 50s, it was available land in inexpensive places to live. But the dynamics where everything is so expensive in most parts of California has really been something that's lasted over the last probably only 15 years or so. It's always been a little bit more expensive than other places in the country, but this extraordinary difference has only really been 15 years, and that's been under the current political environment. So, but I guess the issue in my mind is, if you're going to start a new business, what does this mean to you as a business startup? Is it a place where you can afford to hire people? Is it a place where you can afford the exorbitant office space prices? Does it make a good incubator for any small businesses other than the ones that serve those who stay? In other words, if a group of us can afford to stay because we're already here, then there's a market that can be served here. So restaurants that serve that market will, probably do fine and continue to do well. But manufacturing is going to continue to decline as it has, even though it's the largest manufacturing state in the country. But if they continue to leave and we're replacing all of those with warehouses, which simply have to do with the existing population, where does the actual real growth come from? And that's got to be Silicon Valley, I got to believe, because manufacturing is not really going to be able to pick up. I would suggest there's no place to put manufacturing in cities anymore, and cities and manufacturers have been asked to leave the LA basin.
Well, not necessarily being asked to leave, but Elon Musk, of course, is a very good reference point here, because here's an industry that came to be and came to life in California, and part of it was for the creativity that was available, the intellectual capital that was available, and that included everything from semiconductors to chemical sciences to manufacturing. So it was a sweet spot, and it's actually what California historically has been exceptionally good at. And then as it grew, he realized that the benefits, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the hidden benefits, the benefits of being here, which helped him morph into a real live business, actually ended up being not that beneficial as he grew in size.
Right.
Now, in the background is Auckland City, and I grew up in New Zealand. And one of the things I want to talk about here with the gross and the net concept is, okay, so the personal income has net-wise gone down. But my question would be, what are the hidden or unseen benefits that we have started to receive by living in California? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating to say that it's a good thing and the numbers are going to come out in our favor. But what I am saying, if I compare this, for example, to New Zealand, one of the benefits of living in New Zealand, where personal taxation is very high, and government control of business is very high. One of the benefits of living in that environment is if you can find a niche or a crack in your market, so to speak, to survive, right, then your people are to some extent taken care of extremely well outside of your cost. Because one of the benefits in New Zealand is medical costs are all taken care of. Recreation is inexpensive. You can drive to the beach, as you can see. You can drive to the mountains. So there are some hidden benefits in New Zealand, but there are some extremely high costs that are absorbed. So your net income actually is not growing as much. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is equal case in California, because I tend to suspect that there are some benefits in living in California. I mean, we have nice weather. We can go to the beach, or we can go to the mountains. Those things are true. And possibly some of the healthcare benefits may be very good for a lower income indigent population. They're not really good for those people in middle class or upper class, because they get very, very costly. So there's a trade-off here. But what I am suggesting to you is, hidden in that bigger story is, are there any benefits that over the last couple of years have been really beneficial that would offset that net 50th position? And I don't know there is.
Well, yeah, and you compare that to Texas. So, you say Okay, we had an increase of 5%, but they had an increase of 11.5%. Now, the question then is, wow, and $100,000 salary, that's $5,000 more in 1 year. So how does that impact people in a higher income? And if it's a $50,000 salary, that's $2,500, and they're paying half the price for their house as we are, and they're getting twice as many square feet as we are. And so the question then is, well, okay, is it really down to the weather? And is that weather worth $5,000? Now, I would argue that probably is.
Right.
I mean, that's me at my stage of life.
Right.
But I think the bigger issue is it an environment that is conducive to small businesses thriving? I mean, I think that's really what this discussion should be about is this a place where small businesses ought to say, you know what, I'm great with that because I don't have to pay as much more for my people. Well, no, that's not it. That's not how it actually worked. You had to pay a lot more for your people because the state wage controls, minimum wages have gone up dramatically in the last 3 years. And so it's a less secure environment for hiring good people than in Texas.
Let me focus on that. I think you brought up a good point. It's kind of narrowing it down a little bit so we can come up with maybe some good observations. Number one is on a manufacturing basis. I don't see how we can compete nationally with any other state because our cost structure is so much more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're producing widgets and or buggy whips or whatever you want to call it, and people are going to buy based on price, how can we produce anything cost effectively in California when we have the high rates of wages? Government compliance, which is a tremendous hit against small manufacturing companies, real estate prices. It's almost like our state is so big and they have other interests. They're not really interested in the manufacturing segment anymore. So the only time it really makes economic sense to manufacture in the state is when you're servicing this market.
Yeah.
So if you're servicing this market, it costs to bring in stuff from other parts of the country, it costs money in transportation.
Right.
If you're here serving LA, which is a heck of a market, right?
Right.
And you've got a manufacturing plant, I don't see how anybody could compete against us being close to where our market is.
Well, that has to do with the shipping costs, and the energy costs. We have a client whose energy costs just went up 40%. So that's a major cost. I don't think you're going to find trucking fuel go up 40%. So the issue then would be, well, as long as it's lower than that, you could ship from Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, and get it here still cheaper than you could manufacture it here.
But if you've got a product that is really time sensitive and you got to meet your customer demands, you feel more comfortable with a lot less risk producing it down the street than you do producing it in Nevada, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think that has to be a factor in it too. And the other thing is California laws now are making it very difficult to ship things in and out because they're controlling how you pay the truckers that drive into California. Truckers are going to have to pay some tax related to fuel because they gotta fuel up somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act from that point of view, right?
Oh, very much so.
And adding into that from the energy standpoint, I just did a little analysis of energy costs in 3 or 4 states. California is, from a manufacturing point of view, if any company is using or wanting to heat things or cool things or press things, the core of manufacturing, right? Not only are we trying to get rid of natural gas, which is a very efficient low-cost provider that can be very clean. But that's on its way out according to our current legislation. That's one. Two, our electricity costs are 3 times that of states that are very close to us. So if you have a manufacturing process that's not digital, not virtual, if you're actually making real things, it's at a distinct disadvantage. Now, it would be offset by distance and transportation. But speaking of transportation, very soon we're going to have no diesel allowed. Now, and diesel can be very clean, and it's extremely efficient for larger heavy haul. So, we're kind of getting ourselves into a noose where we're almost saying, if you're in manufacturing, do not come to California. We want virtual manufacturing. We want digital manufacturing.
Yeah.
We want financial manipulation stuff going on, but we're not really going to put up with anything that processes material.
Yeah. And the irony is that when we bring things in from out of the country, we have to pay the fuel price to even get it here. And for instance, in steel, we've got a big steel plant that uses an awful lot of stuff from Japan. They ship it in, and then they have to ship it out to the location, and then they spend very, very high energy fashioning it into the products that they make. And it gives everybody in that kind of an industry pause to think about what the long-term situation is going to be in California. And one wonders if the ultimate end isn't that this is a retirement state. We all stay because we're here. We care a little bit less about whether or not our houses appreciate or not, because we're going to be here. We still want things to come to us. We still want to buy TVs and so forth, but that's all a matter of shipping and congestion. We haven't talked about congestion. I mean, it's kind of absurd what's going on right now in terms of how many trucks there are on the roads trying to get from our ports through Southern California to go to the rest of the country. So, but then on the other hand, I mean, when we had our little crisis in shipping, where we had weeks and weeks and weeks of ships waiting out in the ocean to get in, something like 40%, 30 to 40% of all of that business went to the Gulf Coast and the East Coast. They're going through a larger Panama Canal now. We lost that business. So if California is going to be a energy expensive state to drive through or to manufacture, people are going to go elsewhere.
Right.
They're just not going to be here at all. Therefore, we're going to be a wonderful retirement location, and have no industry. We'll have Silicon Valley and leisure time. Is that what we're going to be in the future?
Well, I think if I can add a point to that, Ron, we still have families being raised here and growing here. I think, what happens internal to the state is not going to change much. People who have lived here and have families here and want to stay here will stay here. So I'd be interested to know what the birth rate is here in California compared to the rest of the nation, and see, how that impacts the future. And I was going to make a point about your saying, 15 years ago, things were different in California. Well, I moved here in 1980, and I almost fell off my drive-in wagon when I discovered the cost of housing here in California versus Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And it was exempt, but what brought me here, it was a $40,000 a year salary, which I said, wow, that's just wonderful, until I had to factor in the housing costs.
Right. Well, and I moved here from Denver 35 years ago, and the housing prices were maybe 5 or 6% higher at that time. Mm-hmm. And so I was really speaking the last 15 years is really when we have had a single party government, and therefore that agenda is being moved forward, and there's no balance. And I think we had balance when I was here 35 years ago. We had balance. We don't have balance anymore. That's contributing to the issues that we've talked about.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ron. I think when you live in other parts of the country, they'll tell you right up front, they don't want to do business in California.
Yeah.
There's just too many rules that you have to follow. There's too much risk associated with lawsuits. If you miss something very minor, could cost you millions of dollars. We have clients that were in that situation. Wage and Hour has said it's hit almost every small business in the state, and there's no protection for them. And some of these businesses have gone, belly up because of that. And then you look at the state of California, it's basically a one-party state. And there's no checks and balances in a one-party state, in my opinion. And I really don't see that changing. And that's kind of the will of the people. And so I think we're going to be under that type of situation for the near future, for at least. Anyway, when we got here, there was pretty much a balanced government. There were two parties.
Mhm.
And I don't know what happened to that, but it's really changed significantly since that time. It is a hard state to do business in, period.
So
And
there's
especially manufacturing.
Yeah.
there is a philosophy out there where if government wants to make everybody equal, imagine let's all share in the success of the society that we're in. If that becomes an objective, if equality or equity becomes an objective, what ends up happening typically, and you can look worldwide for this, is everybody becomes equally poor. What happens is the standard of living actually decreases slowly as the demand or the mandate to become equal. Because what happens is the Six Sigma performers actually get penalized at one end for being the performers. And they end up saying, well, why am I going to do it? And they leave. So, we are actually regrettably heading down that road of doing that. Again, going back to my home country of New Zealand, there was a period of time when a lot of the high performing companies and people actually left New Zealand to go and work outside. In fact, it was called the brain drain. For a long time, anybody in their, 18 to 30 who had some get up and go would get overseas experience. That'd just be gone. The only reason that and I'm an example of not necessarily a high performer, but I'm an example of somebody who said, let's make something different work for me. And there's countless people who've done that. But one of the reasons that people go back is exactly the same reason that we're all in California. We come back to the place that we come from primarily because of people, because of our family, because of the quality of life. And quality of life now starts to be not based in dollars and cents, but based on relationships. Mm-hmm. And it could be relationships with the mountains and the sea. Right. Sounds a bit John Denverish, I suppose, but it could be a relationship of that. But it's normally about our support network and the ability we've got to impact the lives of others and our own lives. So that's the really sticky stuff that California has that I think is being counted on. I mean, it is.
Sacramento is well aware of the assets of this state, and being well-to-do people, for the most part, they appreciate maintaining that for the people who can afford it. I believe that they think that it's the natural attributes here in the economy of the decades before will be enough to get people to choke down anything that they decide that they would like to send our way. And I think that sadly, that's true. There are a lot of people who won't leave because of the relationships. I'm one of those. If I didn't have a lot of family here, I would be gone in a second. But if you can afford to, if you want to come back and visit California, you can do that if you have the money. But the other issue is that if you're trying to live in, say, San Francisco because you've got one of these great jobs and you've got a 600 square foot apartment that costs $1 million, there are people who once they buy that little place in the mountains or that little ranch in Montana, they get used to that and they realize, well, they can live in a digital world just as easily, and so they're gonna be living in both places. How many people in California can afford to do that? And I suggest it's maybe 10% or 5% of us can do that. It's a very small number. So
let me go to John's example. His daughter just moved to Washington, and right. I have other family members that I know that have left the state because they want to buy a house and they can't buy it here in California. So right. The truth is, many of our younger people are are going to leave because basically they want to have a piece of the lifestyle that we were able to afford, and that's one of the things that has happened here.
Yeah.
They're leaving, and I don't
Yeah.
blame them. I want my children to have a home, and they can't afford one here.
That's right. That's right. And so, and it's a horrible thing to grow up in a place and then not be able to live in a house that, is something similar to what you're used to in growing up. But the truth of the matter is that our young kids, very few of them can afford a house commensurate to the one that they grew up in. And therefore, and it may only be half as much as that. And therefore they are leaving it. That's why 700,000 have left. And those are the ones that are the good salaries. They're good medium income salaries that are leaving for better opportunities. And so, and that's why I say it's going to be a bunch of us, old guys who had the advantage of the appreciation because we were here already.
Right.
But how many new people are moving into the state because they want to retire here?
So how do we reverse the
Not
spin?
happening. Not happening.
As I'm listening to our conversation, I'm detecting the plane has got a slight lean to it. And so hypothetically, how could we reverse the spin of the trajectory we are on? What would it take? Seriously, what would it take for California to perhaps climb from 50th of net gain personal income to, let's be, 25th? Let's not be the leader here. I mean, let's just get back in the game.
Well, I mean, the other area where we've slipped from number 1 to number 49 or so is education. And so, what does it take to completely reverse our educational system? Oh my gosh, I wouldn't have any idea how to even approach that. What would it take to reverse all of the oppressive laws on small business today? I can't imagine what, you might say if we got a balanced legislature, it would stop from happening, but they couldn't necessarily reverse it. I don't see it. I don't see it in the cards that we're going to be able to reverse just education and just business regulation, just those two things.
Every year, there's thousands of new rules for business regulations.
Thousands. There are 24,000 regulations to build a house. Right. 24,000. How in the world do you build houses like that?
So if you miss one of the regulations, then you got a lawsuit at your doorstep.
Right.
So that hurts your ability to generate income and produce a product.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if I were starting a brand new business again, I would base it out of state somehow and do everything I could to stay out of California while living in California. And there lies the irony, gentlemen.
Right.
Well, that keeps the IRS busy chasing those people that want to live here but want to be domiciled for business purposes in Nevada.
Right. Of course, don't forget California, the Sacramento has in several initiatives where they want to tax you for 10 years after you leave.
That's right.
So, it's like, well, you made all your money here. You should continue to pay taxes, even if you're in Japan. It's like, wait a minute. I mean, they literally want to get your hooks in you for life. That's what Sacramento's trying to do.
Well, let me ask you a question. I mean, the real point that I think you made, Ed, is as long as the people continue to vote Democratic, there's nothing we can do to change it. Why are they voting this way? What is it? What's in it that's
a great question. That is the question right there.
Yeah. Well, and I think the answer is that most people are workers and they feel as though they're more protected as workers. But I think this article proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that workers are not benefiting based on our current state government. They're not benefiting. And it's just, perhaps it takes time for them to learn. Perhaps they just don't care. Perhaps their family is most important, or surfing is most important, and therefore they're going to put up with it. But for whatever reasons, we don't have that independent spirit, that sort of kick-ass, we're going to make things right in terms of the general population. they're not standing up, learning, and understanding where we're at. And that in itself is a problem. And perhaps that's an education problem. Perhaps that's why our education is among the worst in the nation.
Well, I've got a slightly different take that I want to be soft in my approach in this. So I think one of the groups of people that are doing fairly well out of California happen to be a group that are involved in civic community. If you're a fireman, and we've got some excellent firemen, and if you're a police officer, if you're a teacher, or if you're a civic employee, there are benefits that go past the employment income. It's called retirement, gentlemen, and we as business owners don't have what the firemen, the police, the teachers have. It's a very, very generous and long-lasting promise.
And include
income till death do us part.
Include the government unions as well.
I'm trying not to, being very soft in my approach. So what I'm saying is there's a group of people who are definitely beneficial. And when it comes to elections, you don't get elected unless you have endorsement of the fire department and the police department. And so we have actually ended up where I would say the providers of service and support for our communities end up with a very large leverage over the voting process of getting elected. And so we've reached the point of no return. New Zealand has been past the point of no return for years, and you can study it and look at it, and you'll realize that when I left in the 80s, 60% of the population were employed by government mandated income. Now, when you have a situation like that, that means the government or the political party in power can mandate your well-being, and if they're treating you well, you vote for them.
Yeah,
that's what we've got in California.
I agree with that. That's a very good assessment.
And so regrettably, that's what we've got in California.
Yeah,
well, John,
it used to be to protect and serve, and this is a little bit. I don't want it to be mean-spirited, but used to be Andy Griffith show would have, to protect and serve on the side of their cars. And it was to protect and serve the community. Now the concept of protect and serve is somewhat about protecting and serving their immunity to be out of a job and out of income. So that's, leave it there.
It's true. And I think, I guess the question for you, John, is I know you left Auckland or New Zealand because of that. What are you going to do now?
Well, yeah, that's true. I hear your pain. In a way, I feel at my stage of life, I could actually go back and live in New Zealand because it's a known. And see, in New Zealand, one of the benefits that we have is being older individuals is all of our medical care is taken care of. You don't have any medical costs. You don't have any out-of-pocket insurance costs that are major. You can live extremely well with good medical care. So that burden is gone. And
for the individual, for now.
For the individual. And of course, that's why people go, hey, it's not too bad. Look at what I get, So, there is a temptation in saying that.
Sorry about that.
There's a temptation that saying that, I'm going to just be well taken care of by the motherland. And, California is in part saying that to a whole group of people. We will take care of you. You're taken care of. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. That's it. And I don't know, probably the discussion of what that means long-term is probably for another show.
Yes, exactly. I think we kicked this can down the road as you just did, Ron. And
I look at it this way. I can only control what I control. And then when it comes to politics of any state, I can't control it. I try to figure out what's the best way to optimize a business in the environment that you work in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the people that you are associated with.
Yeah, I think we all do that, and management does that. Professional managers do that very well. Professional managers are often not entrepreneurs, So the question is, what do the entrepreneurs do? And I think that's my concern for California. You know, we've had so many from Disney and the arts and the movies. I mean, you know, we've dominated this for so long, and it just you just kind of wonder, can that continue? And I wonder if it can.
Yeah. Well, I think that's on that note, guys, it's this was an engaging conversation. I think we should either look at it again, but we do have a topic for next week too. And I think this was fruitful and gives us all pause. Is it better to go back to New Zealand, or are we better off trying to transform this area and get people to change their voting habits if it prevents us from sliding deeper into this hole that you've just pointed out to us, Ron?
Well, so therefore, I just would like to say that as soon as John moves, we can all go back and live with him in New Zealand.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks.